All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive. And today, we've got a fascinating one. We are going to be looking at legal strategy through the lens of the Zodiac.
Interesting.
Yeah, should be fun. So we're going to be looking at a YouTube video called Zodiac Signs and Legal Strategy, the Astrological Truth. And, we're not saying that, looking up your birth chart or, whatever sign you are is going to make or break your case in court, but maybe you can give us some fun insights.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's jump right in. And, this video starts off by talking about the elements, right? So fire, earth, air, and water. And each of those is associated with different approaches to legal strategy. So I guess let's start with fire.
Okay, sounds good.
What do you think comes to mind when you think of the fire signs and how that might translate to like a courtroom setting?
Well, I mean, right off the bat, I'm thinking Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, right? Those are
Yeah.
the fire signs. And those folks are typically known for being bold, assertive, maybe even a little bit aggressive sometimes.
Right.
So I could see them being very comfortable, kind of being in the heat of litigation, being comfortable with confrontation, not shying away from a little bit of a battle.
Right. Yeah. Definitely.
But then again, that kind of boldness, that willingness to just jump in could also be a little bit of a disadvantage too, right?
Yeah, totally. You could see it like leading them to, make rash decisions or maybe overlook important details, just because they're so like ready to charge forward.
Exactly. Yeah, they might be prone to impulsivity, and that's not always the best thing in a legal setting.
Right. Totally. So how about earth signs then? How would you say their characteristics translate?
Well, earth signs are like the opposite of fire in a lot of ways, right? So Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn, these are people who are grounded, they're practical, they're all about, tangible outcomes. And I think that could make them really effective in like negotiations and settlements.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Where it's all about, reaching a compromise,
Right.
finding solutions that are fair and, that benefit everyone involved. I could definitely see an earth sign like thriving in that kind of environment.
Right. Yeah, I can see that too. And especially because they're, like you said, practical. So maybe they're less likely to get, swept up in all the drama and the theatrics of a, courtroom trial.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So how about air signs? Then what about Gemini, Libra, Aquarius?
Yeah, air signs are interesting because they're the communicators of the zodiac, right? So they're very good at, expressing themselves. They can see multiple sides of an issue. They're often very diplomatic. And I think, all of those qualities could make them really excellent mediators.
Yeah, definitely.
Because mediation is all about finding that common ground, right?
Yeah.
Getting everyone to communicate effectively and kind of, coming to an agreement that everyone can live with.
Right, right.
So I could see an air sign, being very successful in that kind of role.
Yeah, and they're probably really good at crafting arguments too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, they probably just naturally have that ability to like present their case in a way that's, persuasive and logical.
For sure. For sure. And also, they're good at de-escalating conflict, right? They don't like to see people fighting and arguing, so they're going to try to smooth things over and get everyone to, come together peacefully.
Yeah, totally. Now, contrast that with water signs, because that's our last element.
Mm-hmm.
Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces. What do you think?
Yeah, water signs are interesting because they're very intuitive and emotionally intelligent, right? They kind of have this ability to, tap into those emotional undercurrents. And I think that could make them incredibly persuasive in front of a jury.
Oh, yeah.
Because, a jury trial is all about, connecting with the jury on an emotional level, right? Getting them to see your side of the story and feel empathy for your client.
Right.
And I think a water sign would be very good at doing that.
Yeah, totally. I can just imagine like a really powerful closing argument coming from like a Cancer or a Scorpio, really tugging at the heartstrings.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So it really is interesting how you can kind of see how these different zodiac archetypes could play out in, the legal field.
It really is. Yeah. And, it makes me wonder if, understanding this kind of stuff could actually help people, choose a lawyer.
Right, like choosing a lawyer whose strengths align with their case.
Exactly. Yeah. For example, let's say you have a case that involves like really complex financial transactions.
Right.
Maybe you would want a Virgo lawyer because they're so detail-oriented, they're analytical with, they're going to make sure that every, I is dotted and every Ed is crossed.
Totally, yeah. But then on the other hand, if it's like a personal injury case,
right,
where it's all about like proving emotional distress and suffering, maybe you would go for that Scorpio lawyer
Exactly.
who can really, like we were saying before, tap into those emotions.
Yeah, it's all about finding the right fit, right? Matching the lawyer's strengths to the specific needs of the case.
Right. And I think that's one of the coolest things about this video is that it actually does, call out some real life cases
Oh, really?
where you can kind of see these zodiac traits in action.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it talks about, a famous case where a Libra lawyer was really successful in, achieving a fair and balanced outcome for their client,
Interesting.
which, aligns perfectly with the whole Libra energy of, harmony and balance.
Right.
So it's really cool to see those real world examples.
Definitely.
Yeah. Now, the video also gets into some other interesting stuff, like the idea of using astrology for timing legal actions.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like finding auspicious dates to file a lawsuit or to sign a contract, like trying to kind of work with the cosmic energy in your favor.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it even talks about Mercury retrograde
Oh, of course.
and how that could potentially impact legal matters. Like maybe you want to avoid, making any big decisions or signing any important documents during a Mercury retrograde period.
Right, right.
But of course, it's important to remember that this is all kind of, just for fun.
Right, it's not an exact science.
Yeah. Exactly. It's not like you should base your entire legal strategy on your zodiac sign or anything like that.
Exactly. It's more about, having an open mind and maybe considering some different perspectives.
Right. Like it's just another tool in the toolbox.
Yeah.
It's something to think about and maybe it can give you a little bit of an edge, but, don't take it too literally.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what do you think about all this?
I think it's really fascinating. It's a really unique way to look at legal strategy, and it really highlights the fact that, even in a field like law, which is often seen as very, structured and logical,
Right.
there's still a lot of room for, individual personality and different approaches.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of these deep dives.
Yeah.
It's all about exploring these unconventional ideas and seeing how they can, challenge our assumptions and maybe even, help us see things in a new light.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for everyone listening out there,
Yeah.
what do you think? Does this make you want to go check your birth chart and see how your zodiac sign might be influencing your approach to, conflict resolution and decision making?
It's definitely something to think about.
Yeah, it's food for thought for sure. And if you're interested in learning more, be sure to check out that YouTube video that we mentioned, Zodiac Signs and Legal Strategy, the Astrological Truth. It's definitely worth a watch. And who knows, maybe you'll discover some hidden strengths or, some potential pitfalls that you can, use to your advantage.
That's the fun part.
Yeah, exactly. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. But we will be back again soon with another fascinating topic. So until then, stay curious and keep exploring.
See you next time.